Dead on Your Feet. Arthur Grant Michaels, St. Martin's Press, New York, 1993. Stan Kraychik Mystery, Book 3. Narrator Eric Aust. In memory of Tajana and Andre, with gratitude and respect and love, thanks to the patience and generosity of my friends. Chapter 10. She could have danced all night. Next morning I was at Snip's catching up on the previous day's neglected office work. It was a vague relief to be using the left side of my brain. The drudgery of paperwork seemed to put order in my life, unlike my fumbling murder investigation. Nicole breezed into the salon around 10 o'clock. I heard her cheery good morning as she made her way through the shop to my office and back. She appeared in the open doorway at full attention, bosom lifted high and neckline drawn taut. "Good morning," she exclaimed, as though all was well with the world. She entered, poured herself a cup of coffee, and sat down comfortably in the new side chair. "Sex therapy is working, huh, doll?" I said, and focused myself on the paperwork. "Put that aside for a moment, darling. Let's talk." "You're telling me to stop working?" "Just for a little while. Did you see the sky?" "The sky? It's gorgeous this morning. The clouds are so white against the azure blue. It's almost like the Mediterranean." "You're effluviating, doll." "Oh, Stanley, Boston can be so beautiful." And that did it. I slammed the ledger closed and swiveled in my chair to face her. "Who and how?" I asked. Nicole sipped her coffee demurely and batted her long eyelashes at me. "You know I never tell," she said. "Do I know him?" "I should say so," she replied with an unnatural giggle. "I need a clue." "No, you don't," she said coyly. "Then it must be Branco," I joked, but instead of refuting my guess, Nicole blushed. Amazed, I asked, "Did you bed Branco?" She said nothing and cast her eyes toward the open window. "Spill it," I demanded. Nicole made no reply. "Does that mean there's nothing to spill?" I went on. Silence and a cool stare were her answers. "Or maybe nothing got spilled?" "Doll?" "Sometimes those younger men lack experience." "The lieutenant is hardly a younger man," Nicole replied bluntly. "He's younger than you, doll." "But then, Stanley, some experiences are too elevated for vulgar conversation." "Look who's getting ritzy." "Don't bare your claws, young man. You tend to your work. I'll tend to the lieutenant." "And how?" But I knew that Nikki had intended to provoke me. She and the lieutenant couldn't have done it, could they? Really? Coupled? I knew she had a fairly active sex life, but Branco? Was such a thing possible? Given his machismo, charisma, instantaneous lust was the typical human response to him, but performing mundane sexual acts with that Olympic god of the Mediterranean seemed improbable, too common, too vulgar. As Nikki had said, Lieutenant Branco was the kind of person who appeared to be on reserve, waiting for his complement, the singular, star-crossed partner. The matching goddess who could never materialize in an ordinary world, and certainly not in the embodiment of Nicole Albright. No, more likely their evening together had been a sexual bust, and Nikki was concealing her disappointment under the guise of secrecy. Suddenly, Ramon, the shampoo boy, stuck his head in the partly open doorway. "Walk-in request for Stanley," he said, adding with a smug grin, "It's a man." Then he vanished. At this stage of my career, a walk-in request is nearly always a referral from one of my exclusive clients, so the new customer, though a stranger, is primed to be pleased and to pay. "Duty calls," I said. "You mean money," replied Nicole. "We'll continue this later." I took a gulp of coffee and went out to the shop floor. Standing in the reception area was Marshall Sander, and he did need a haircut. I hope it's not too presumptuous to arrive without an appointment, he said. It was such a beautiful day that I went walking, and I thought I'd stop in. I have some time, I said coolly. How fortunate for me. I'd like a shampoo and condition and a trim, he said. Then he laughed heartily and added, the works. His attempt at cleverness made me feel more like a utility company employee than an exclusive stylist, but I can play the dutiful proletarian when necessary. I gave Marshal Xander a smock to protect his clothes after he changed and came out of the dressing room. I noticed a faint but unpleasant odor about him, something like rotten fruit. Perhaps it was all the mood-lifting drugs he was taking. I led him to the shampoo sinks. Ramon, keeper of that fief, grinned broadly as if to say, Mr. Big Shot, still get some pretty ugly walk-ins. Dear Ramon didn't recognize my opportunity to do some PI work. I knew perfectly well that Marshal Xander had come to Snips for something other than hair work. My simple challenge was to find out exactly what he wanted to know without telling him anything from my side of the styling chair. I applied a dollop of moisturizing shampoo to his coarse brown hair and worked up a creamy, sudsy mousse. As I massaged his scalp, he closed his eyes and moaned quietly in pleasure. That particular response to my able hands is not uncommon, but I wasn't too eager to get so cozy with Marshal Xander. I nipped his moment of bliss with a not-so-accidental burst of icy water from the spray nozzle. He flinched, but then smiled, and I see that he had enjoyed the jolt of surprise, however uncomfortable. I said, You seem to be holding up well with all this nasty business. It's thanks to my pills, he said. I've been sleeping better, too. How are you doing? Have you come up with anything new? Regarding what? You've been talking to people around the ballet company. Talk is cheap. Whom do you suspect? I didn't reply, though I was impressed with his grammar. He went on with a light tone. Do you suspect me? I don't really have the right to suspect anyone. Forget about your rights. What about your logic? At whom does your ratiocination point its accusing finger? That was a big word from the man with the big bankroll. I was about to answer him when I felt the rustle of a familiar energy behind me. I turned around to see Rafik, standing there with a gigantic floral bouquet in his arms. With what mixed emotion did my heartbeat accelerate? Rafik couldn't see whose head was in the sink, and Marshal Xander couldn't see Rafik behind me. My intuition told me it was better left that way. I sent Rafik a silent kiss shaped with my lips, then nodded my head toward the office and back, where he and I could commune in privacy. First, though, I squirted a massive dose of conditioner into Marshal Xander's hair. Don't move, I ordered. I'm not going anywhere, he said obediently. Fortunately, Nikki had already left my office, so Rafik and I could be alone. Once inside, he closed the door with his foot, and then suddenly we were grappling at each other. The flowers fell to the floor. We swooned. We tripped over my chair and tumbled into it together, entangled in a passionate embrace. My guy. He spoke first. Forgive me? For what? I replied, as though there was nothing to forgive. Rafik spoke haltingly. Last night I was the jerk. No, beloved. 'Twas I in my jealous frenzy who was, is, and always will be le jerk. Please sign here. So you are not angry, he said. Dubious, perhaps, but not angry. More insistent hugs and kisses followed. Two people, too much in love. When we finally came up for air, Rafik said, Tony wants to talk to you. That wasn't exactly the sweet love line I was hoping to hear. I spotted the flowers lying on the floor. Now they seemed something more than a generous gift from my lover. They were a distraction from Rafik's renewed infidelities. And with that observation, I sensed we were at it again, dancing our schizophrenic tango. Forgive me. Trust me. Help me. Here are flowers. I love you. Go away. Da capo. What does she want? I said. She has the idea who killed Max Harkey. She should tell the police. No, Stanley. They do not believe her. I stared into Rafik's eyes. His were not the kind of eyes to be refused easily, if at all. I already knew I was going to do what he wanted. I was going to chase down Tony de Natal and talk to her solely because she had asked it of my lover. But this time I intended to extract something in return, something to equalize the deal with Rafik. I already knew what that was, and in the most nonchalant tone I could manage, I asked for it. "Do you know where I can find Rico?" Rafik's eyes flared in sudden anger. "Why?" "Because he's the one person at the Denny party I haven't spoken to yet." "That is all you want him for?" "I want from him what you want from Tony de Natal." He narrowed his eyes, but the fire still came through. "You do not know who I am with her." "I'm trying to make you understand how I feel." He turned his head away, as though my feelings were the most repulsive things in the universe. I suppose sometimes they were. "If you want Rico," he said angrily, "you should ask Marshal Zander. Rico lives with him now." Max Harkey's former houseboy seemed to be moving faster than ever. "I only want to question him, Rafik, and in return I'll talk with Tony. Fair is fair. Where is she now?" Rafik's eyes burned. "She is staying with me." Silence again. Now I was the flowers on the floor, something innocent that had been used to perpetrate a lie. I thought we were different, Rafik and I, stronger, truer, above this kind of mawkish thing. The more fool I. Oh, I know. I'd set it up from the beginning, pitting my provincial love against the sophistication of Tony de Natal. But now Rafik had made his choice, and it was an odd surprise, the quietness of it, that he would choose her over me. I should have been generous and thanked him for the thrill of novelty of being left for a woman. But I could say nothing. He turned quietly and left me alone. Maybe we could still be friends, and maybe someday I'd be married with children. A few minutes later I regained my bearings, or so I thought, and returned to the shop floor. Marshal Zander was still at the shampoo sink where I'd left him, with a load of conditioner in his hair, with that stuff penetrating his hair shafts all the time. Mr. Zander was going to be extremely fluffy when he left Snip's salon today. No extra charge. As I rinsed his hair, he asked, "Is everything all right?" He sounded so earnest that I almost burst into tears, even though his concern for me resembled the witless devotion of a big, stupid dog. "Nothing time won't fix," I said ruefully. I wrapped a towel around his head and led him to my station. Once he settled in there, he reminded me, "Just a trim?" "Only the tips," I said, and began my work. It was more combing than anything else. He didn't need cutting at all, and once again I wondered why he'd come to see me. Well, he could keep his secret for all I cared. I just wanted to get to Rico, who was now staying with him. "You live in town, don't you?" I asked. He raised an eyebrow. "I have a place here, yes." "Close by?" He made a small frown. I added quickly, "I thought you might want to be on my mailing list." "That's not necessary. I know where you are." I shrugged. "Sometimes we have special offers for our better customers, and we let them know by mail." He wouldn't even nibble. How was I going to break through this guy's defensive torpor and get his address? By the time I finished faking his trim, the disgusting answer came to me in a flash of voluptuous glory. "Use sex." Hell, it wasn't working as an expression of love, so why not use it as a bargaining chip? I caressed Marshal Zander's scalp extra tenderly and leaned toward him, putting my head near his and murmuring into his ear, "If you live close by, well, I might drop in sometime." Of course, I'd never do it, even though I was technically a free agent as of 10 minutes ago. Marshal Zander turned his head toward me. "Do you mean that?" he said. "Why not?" I replied. His eyes were swampy with desire. "I keep a suite at the Copley Palace. Just get my name to the concierge." He winked and my stomach turned. Sure, I'd got the information I wanted, but I was horrified at how easily it had come once I'd found the key. Even worse, I realized that this was probably how a lot of people were getting what they wanted from each other. The hair work finished, I removed the protective cape. Marshal Sanders stood up and put out his hand. I accepted it, but recoiled at its rough dryness. Yet he held on to me and spoke as though reciting a carefully prepared statement. It was a difficult decision for me to come here today, but I can tell you the truth now. I was concerned about the things I said to you the other morning, about you and your lover. I regret it very much. I'm still quite distraught, but thanks to the tranquilizers, I'm functioning well. But beyond all that, my point is, well, I like you, and I was worried that I had offended you the other day. But just now, you've proven to me that everything is all right between us. You put my mind at peace. I hope you'll come by sometime soon. Oh, God, no. A date with him was not what I wanted, but I had to forge ahead. Thank you, I said in the most neutral voice I could muster, then solely to find out when he would not be there, I ventured. Will you be around today? I'm afraid not. I've got appointments all afternoon. Another time then, I said, utterly relieved and strained to conceal it. Soon, he said with a hungry leer. I extricated my hand from his. He turned and went toward the reception desk, making his way there with a noticeable spring in his step and a ridiculous bounce that made him look like an absurd motor-driven toy. I knew that my flirtation had caused it, and I was disheartened. I fled to the solace of my little chamber and back. Minutes later, Nicole joined me there. Somebody likes you a lot, she said. He's not my type, doll. Not to mention that you are already betrothed. I grunted in reply, the way Branco might have. Nicole placed a crisp $50 bill on top of my desk. From Mr. Sanders, she said, with a raised eyebrow. See what I mean? Rich and crass. Is everything all right with Rafik? Why? Your shoulders are drooping. I pulled myself up straight. Everything is exactly the same, except I think we just broke up. Stanley, what have you done now? Hardly my fault alone. Oh, she exclaimed with exasperation. I give up. Why can't you just... Because I can't, I shouted in a sudden burst of frustration. I just can't, Nikki. I want to be strong and understanding. I want to accept everything calmly. I want to be the rock of stability, but I just can't do it. I can't accept him wanting to be involved with that woman. With any woman. It feminizes me. Nicole waited for the air to settle down. Then she said faintly, What a pity. He loves you so much. That's an illusion. No, darling. Your denial is the delusion, and one of your own creation. Nikki, how can a man like Rafik love me? Look at me. The only secondary sex characteristic I have is my mustache. The rest of me is as pink and smooth as a girl. But you have that nice square jaw and those strong legs. So does my Aunt Letta. Darling, the fact is, when Rafik wants a woman, he goes to a woman. And when he wants a man, he comes to you. You haven't seen us in bed, doll. Nicole grimaced. I meant your kind of masculinity. You're confusing sex and love again. Don't you think I know that? If anything, I'm too integrated. Believe me, Nikki. If I could disconnect my body from my heart and my mind, I would do it. You analyze your feelings instead of enjoying them. Then you try to control them just the way you try to control Rafik. It's my nature. Nonsense. It's a bad habit. This is foolish, I muttered. I've got things to do. I got up and went to the door. I'll be back later. Where are you going now? She asked with an edge. To create my own reality, I said flatly. You'd do better to face your destiny, she replied. I departed through the back door, which opened onto the alley and led to Berkeley Street. 1 block further on, at Bolston Street, I was about to head up toward Copley Square to the newly erected Copley Palace, when I would find Rico, the houseboy, but instead I continued along Berkeley Street, which led directly to Station D, where I intended to verify some dubious data with Lieutenant Branco. On the way there, I had the odd sensation that I was moving through time and space solely on reflex, undirected by any conscious thought. I recalled one fact only. Rafik had walked out, and one consequence, I felt nothing. No love, no loss, no hatred. Just pure, cold objectivity. I was a locomotive robot devoid of sensation. I stopped at a cafe, bought 2 cappuccinos to go. I couldn't face Branco's office again, not today. Perhaps there was hope for my emotional recovery if I could still worry about good coffee. and getting one for Branco proved that I was still aware and considerate of others, and I could even recall the year it was and the name of the president. Optimism surged. Fortunately, Branco was in. When I gave him the cappuccino, he accepted it graciously, like a contented mortal, like a guy who'd had a good time the night before. "Don't care for my coffee, huh?" he said good-naturedly. "I'm just a desperate and lonely man, bartering for friendship. How is Miss Albright late today?" Once again, my mind raced with images of Branco and Nicole joined together at the pelvis. It was as grotesque as imagining your parents copulating. It just didn't parse, even though the evidence might have indicated otherwise. "Just ducky," I said. I searched for a sign from Branco regarding his night with Nicole, but the cop divulged nothing either. He pried the lid off his coffee cup and gave an approving nod to the contents, but I kept wondering what had happened between them and why now. Branco and Nicole had met before. What new catalyst had appeared to join them now? Was it the presence of the lascivious Tony Di Natale? Maybe that she-beast had not only won my lover's heart, but had also got this cop's juices bubbling to the point where he needed a mortal release, poor thing. And Nicole provided a safe and comfortable haven. She was a known entity, and she wasn't a suspect, which eliminated the unpleasant possibility of a conflict of interest. Someone like Branco would choose his sex partners like that, rationally and sensibly, like a lawyer. "Lieutenant, how about instead of friendship, I settled for some information?" "Like what?" "Did your crew find a big musical score with a hand-tinted cover at Max Harkey's apartment?" Branco pondered a while. I added, "I remember seeing it on the piano the night before." The cop pulled his lip back tightly and shook his head on no. "I don't recall anything like that in our reports. Are you sure about it?" I admit I was loaded that night, but the image is clear in my mind. I know that score was there, and the next morning it wasn't. As if lost in thought or else bored with me, Branco focused on his coffee. Maybe he was really enjoying it. Love does enhance the senses. If he and Nikki had done the job right last night, today's cup of coffee would be a whole new experience for him. I went on to tell him that I'd spoken to Madame Lebenskaya and that I wanted to verify her far-fetched story. "Can I see your statement?" I said. Branco held the cup under his nose as if intoxicated by its aroma. Again he shook his head gently. "No." "But it's all there," he said. "Pretty much how she told it to you. We thought it was odd too, but she really did spend the night at the ballet studios. We have the security guard's records to corroborate it. She arrived there well before Max Harkey's death." "Neat alibi," I said, "as far as it goes, but those records could have been fudged. Madame Rabenskaya lives in the same building as Max Harkey. She could have killed him and then gone to the studios only a few minutes walk away." "You sound like you suspect her," said Branco. "Don't you?" He took a big gulp of coffee and smiled. "The old woman arrived at the studios around 12:30 and stayed there. We figure Max Harkey was attacked after 5 that morning." "How do you know?" "Body temperature," replied Branco. "When we got to him, he was still warm. And with the nature of the wounds and his excellent physical condition, Max Harkey would have lasted more than 5 minutes." "What about the phone calls?" Branco arched an eyebrow. "Which phone calls?" I heard that Max Harkey phoned for help that morning." "Including the call to your friend Rafik," said the cop. "Yeah, well, the question is, with everyone else he called, did Harkey ever phone the police? Doesn't it seem strange that a man is bleeding to death and—" Branco cut me off. "As a matter of fact, we got a 911 call from Max Harkey at 5:15 that morning, and another one shortly after that from Marshal Sander." "How shortly after?" 4 minutes, replied the cop. "So Max Harkey was alive at 5:15. If you use arithmetic, yes." "Did you trace the calls?" Branco's full lips made a little smile. "The first one originated from Max Harkey's apartment, and the second one from one of Marshal Sanders' private lines." Then Branco almost snickered. "What's strange is that Rafik never called us to report the crime, even though he claims that Harkey called him for help too." "I think that's easy to explain, Lieutenant. Rafik told me that Max Harkey said he'd already called the police." "Right," said Branco. "That's what he told us too. So your two stories agree just fine." His voice oozed with insinuation. Well, I said, grasping defensively, I'm sure Rafik just wanted to get to Max as fast as possible. Or away from him, said Branco. What do you mean, Lieutenant? Branco sat back in his chair and seemed to be relishing some morsel of classified information. Well, I said, do you have something on Rafik? Not exactly, replied the cop, extending the words provocatively. There is some evidence, but we haven't determined its exact bearing on the case. What is it? Branco's face went rigid like a portrait cast in bronze. Max Harkey had reached a sexual climax shortly before his death, he said, but we found no evidence of semen anywhere outside his body. Maybe he was a clean freak and flushed everything away. Branco frowned at my attempt at levity. So, Lieutenant, it appears we have the delicate mission of identifying Max Harkey's sex partner that night. Branco hedged. Possibly, I continued. But even then, it might not be his killer. It could have been anybody. Except for the old woman, said Branco. Why not? Just because the security guard said so? Branco snapped. Because I can't imagine it, that's why not. So your lack of sexual imagination means she's innocent. Look, you, said Branco, I'm running this case, and until I'm convinced otherwise, what I say goes. Fine, Lieutenant. I'll just go ask the suspects if they had sex with Max Harkey that night. I'd advise you not to, he said. I'll be discreet about it. My hairdressers know how to get people to talk about sex. In fact, I plan to grill someone this afternoon on his sexual technique. I'm on my way there now. Branco said, Then you'd better get going. I stood up. I thought you said we'd be working together this time. Did I? He said. I headed toward the door. Thanks for the coffee, he said. I grumbled back. Any time. As I opened the door, he said, Please give my regards to Miss Albright. Sure thing, Lieutenant. I left Station D and headed to the Copley Palace. Maybe Rico, the houseboy, held the keys to more than the front door of the new master's abode. A Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.